They say rock bottom has a basement. I found mine the day I got fired live on national television, mascara running, voice shaking, the word disgraced trending beside my name. I thought that was the end of me. Turns out it was just the beginning, because that was the day she walked into my life. Her name was Lily Hart, and she would become both my savior and the one who tore open every wall I'd built around my heart. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days straight in New York. By the time I stumbled into the cafe on 7th Avenue, soaked and humiliated, I was already a ghost of the woman who once graced magazine covers and talk shows. Madison Cole, America's sweetheart journalist turned public scandal. My phone was still buzzing with messages from my agent, tabloids, and a handful of people pretending to care. Just disappear for a while, one said. Lay low. Let it blow over. Another. Disappear? Into what? I had no career, no friends, no faith in myself left. And that's when I saw her. She was sitting by the window, sketching something in her notebook, a world that looked softer than mine. A light scarf framed her face, and her curls shimmered like honey under the dim lights. She looked up, caught me staring, and smiled. That smile didn't belong in my world, it belonged in a kinder one. Rough day? She asked, her tone light, teasing but not cruel. You have no idea, I said, slumping into the chair across from her before I even asked permission. She chuckled low, warm, like she didn't mind. Try me. Something in her voice disarmed me. Maybe it was the way she didn't look at me with pity, or worse, recognition. Maybe she truly didn't know who I was. I'm Madison, I finally said, half daring her to connect the dots. She blinked once, then smiled again. I'm Lily. You look like you could use a hot chocolate more than an introduction. And just like that, she ordered two. I hadn't smiled in days. But I did then. For the next few weeks, that tiny cafe became my sanctuary. I'd sit by the window, scribbling half-baked job applications or ignoring the headlines about me. Lily would be there, sketching, humming, existing in this gentle rhythm that made everything feel less tragic. She was an illustrator, not famous, not rich, just wildly passionate about her art. She taught at a community center for kids, volunteered at a shelter on weekends, and somehow still found time to draw sunsets she claimed never looked the same twice. She didn't ask about my past. Didn't push. She just saw me, the me that was still human under the wreckage. One afternoon, as rain tapped against the glass again, she looked at me and said, You know, sometimes the storm isn't there to drown you. Sometimes it's to clean the slate. I didn't respond, but her words stuck. Then came the night everything changed. I got a call from my former producer, a chance to return to television. Not as an anchor, but as a guest on a sensationalized talk show about redemption arcs. In other words, a spectacle. The old me would have jumped. But the thought of sitting under those bright lights again, being dissected by strangers, made me sick. I told Lily about it that evening as we sat in her small apartment. The walls were filled with her art, soft watercolor worlds where people always found their way home. You should do it, she said. I turned sharply. You think I should humiliate myself again? She put down her brush and met my gaze. No. I think you should tell your truth. On your terms. You don't owe anyone perfection, Madison. But you owe yourself peace. Her words hit something raw in me. Peace. I couldn't even remember what that felt like. I tried to laugh it off. You sound like a therapist. Maybe. Or maybe I've just seen too many people run from their pain instead of painting over it. That night I stayed longer than I meant to. We talked until 2 a.m. The city buzzing quietly below us. At one point she fell asleep beside me on the couch, her head against my shoulder, and I realized I hadn't felt safe in years, not until that moment. But safety, I would learn, was an illusion. The next morning someone leaked a photo me and Lily at the cafe, her laughing, me looking happy. The tabloids spun it instantly. Madison Cole, new scandal, new woman? Disgraced anchor's secret lesbian affair. I stared at the screen, my stomach hollowing out. Lily's name wasn't mentioned, but her face was. Her art account flooded with hate. My phone lit up again, reporters, sponsors, fake apologies. I ran to her apartment before the sun rose. She was sitting on the floor, sketchbook torn apart, tears streaming silently. I'm so sorry, I whispered. She looked up red-eyed. You said this wouldn't happen again. I didn't. I never wanted you to get dragged into this. She shook her head. You don't get it, do you? I wasn't scared for me. I was scared for you. Because you still think you need to apologize for existing. Her words cut deeper than any headline. I didn't know what to say. So I didn't. I just sank to the floor beside her. And for the first time I really cried. She held me quiet and steady, until the storm inside me finally broke. The following week I did go on that show. But not to defend myself. I talked about the industry that chewed people up. About how women were expected to be flawless until they bled trying. About how real love doesn't fit the mold of what society approves. And I said her name. I met someone who reminded me that I'm still human. Her name is Lily Hart. She's not part of this industry, and she deserves respect, not headlines. She taught me that love isn't something you hide in the dark. It's something you fight to protect. The audience was silent. The host blinked, speechless. And when the cameras cut, my phone exploded, this time with messages of support, from strangers, from women who'd been hiding too. That night I went back to the cafe. She was there sketching, pretending not to notice me. Did you mean it? She asked softly when I sat down. Every word, I said. She smiled then, slow and trembling. Then maybe it's time we stop pretending we're afraid. Her hand brushed mine. This time I didn't pull away. Outside, New York glowed, not forgiving but alive. And for the first time since my fall I realized something. Maybe the end of everything I was just the beginning of who I was meant to be. The world doesn't forgive easily, not when you've been its darling once. A month after the interview, my name still hovered online like a ghost that refused to fade. Courageous. Controversial. Madison Cole. From disgrace to defiance. Everyone had an opinion. But I had Lily. We spent our days quietly, between her art classes and my hesitant steps back into writing. I'd taken freelance work, small editorials, heartfelt essays about identity, healing, the power of truth. They didn't pay much, but they gave me something I'd lost. My voice. And yet, even as my heart slowly began to feel whole again, a shadow lingered. Because loving her out loud came with a cost. One Saturday afternoon, we walked hand in hand through Central Park. It was spring, cherry blossoms painted the air pink. Laughter floated from families, joggers, and street performers. I remember thinking how normal it all felt, like maybe we were just two people in love. But then someone shouted, "Hey, aren't you that anchor girl? The lesbian one." Lily's fingers tightened in mine. The man smirked. "Guess you couldn't find a real man, huh?" I froze. Every instinct screamed to walk away, but the humiliation burned too deep. Before I could speak, Lily stepped forward. "You must be exhausted," she said calmly, her voice like glass. "Carrying that much ignorance around all day." He blinked, caught off guard. I tugged her hand. "Lily, let's go." She didn't move. "No, Maddie. He doesn't get to take our peace just because he's miserable." I looked at her, the fire in her eyes, the tremor in her jaw, and I realized something. She wasn't just defending me. She was defending us. That night back home I couldn't stop shaking. I wasn't used to someone fighting for me. Lily wrapped her arms around me. "You don't have to be strong all the time," she whispered. "But I do," I said, voice cracking. "The world's waiting for me to fall again." She touched my chin gently. "Then let them wait. You're allowed to live in peace, Madison, even if they don't think you deserve it." Her words broke something open, not in pain this time, but in release. For the first time, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, love didn't have to be a battlefield. We began building a quiet rhythm together. Morning coffee. Late night sketching sessions. The gentle chaos of shared space, her paints everywhere. My laptop humming on the counter. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Sometimes she'd draw me while I worked, messy, unflattering doodles that somehow captured me better than any photograph ever could. "You always look like you're holding your breath," she teased one night, sketching from across the couch. "Maybe I am," I said, half smiling. "Still waiting for everything to fall apart again." She paused, then handed me the sketchbook. On the page was a simple line drawing me laughing. "Unposed, unguarded. That's how I see you," she said softly. "Not broken. Just in the middle of becoming." And I knew then that Lily wasn't just helping me rebuild my life. She was teaching me how to see beauty in the ruins. But peace is fragile, especially when the past doesn't want to stay buried. It started with a message from my old network. They wanted me back this time for a new kind of talk show, one focused on truth, resilience, and women's voices. It was everything I used to dream of, everything I thought I'd lost. But it came with conditions. Of course, we'd prefer if you keep your private life private, the executive said over the phone. We want audiences to focus on your comeback story, not your personal choices. I laughed bitterly. You mean my sexuality? A long pause. We just don't want controversy to overshadow your talent. I hung up. That night I told Lily. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, painting soft lavender tones into a sunset. They want me to go back, I said. She looked up. And you want to? I do. But not like that. Not if I have to erase who I am. Lily set her brush down and met my eyes. Then don't. But what if this is my only chance? Her gaze softened. If you have to shrink yourself to fit into their world, Maddie, it's not your world anymore. Her conviction was quiet but unshakable. And somehow that scared me more than losing the job. Because what if she was right? What if I'd outgrown the life I'd been chasing all along? A week later, an invitation came for an awards gala one I used to attend every year when I was still America's Golden Girl. I hadn't planned to go, but something in me, pride, defiance, maybe closure, told me I needed to. Lily insisted on coming. If you're walking back into that world, you're not walking alone, she said. When she appeared in that emerald green dress, I forgot how to breathe. The city lights danced on her skin, her eyes fierce yet tender. You look like trouble, I whispered. She grinned. Good. Trouble's overdue. At the gala, cameras flashed like lightning. People stared, whispered, smiled too brightly. I felt the weight of their curiosity pressing against my spine. But then I felt her hand slide into mine, warm, sure, grounding. That simple gesture, two women, hand in hand, made headlines the next day. But I didn't care. For the first time, I wasn't running from the story. I was the story. The backlash came fast, of course. Sponsors withdrew. Former colleagues called me reckless. My inbox filled with both love and hate. But beneath the noise, something else began to shift. Letters from young women. Emails from strangers. People saying they finally felt seen. I watched your interview, one wrote. You gave me courage to tell my parents who I am. Thank you. I read that message out loud to Lily, tears blurring the screen. She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. That's the thing about truth, she murmured. It echoes. Still, not every day was easy. There were fights, small, stupid ones that somehow felt enormous. Like the night I came home late from a meeting, and she accused me of slipping back into my old world, the one where ambition came before love. You promised you wouldn't lose yourself again, she said, her voice trembling. I'm not losing myself, Lily. I'm trying to rebuild what I lost. Then tell me where I fit into that. Her question hung heavy in the air. I don't know, I admitted. I'm still figuring it out. She turned away. Maybe that's the problem. You keep trying to figure it out instead of just living it. For days, the apartment felt colder. I threw myself into work. She buried herself in art. We orbited the same space without touching. Until one night, I found a new painting on her easel. It was me standing at the edge of a cliff, light breaking through storm clouds above. Beneath it, in tiny letters, she'd written, "Find your way home." I stood there for a long time, crying quietly, because I finally understood she wasn't asking me to choose between her and my dreams. She was asking me to come back to myself. So I did. I called the network again. If you want me, I told them, you get all of me, not the sanitized version. I'm not hiding who I love. They hesitated, then agreed. When the first episode of my new show aired, unscripted, Stories That Matter, I opened with a single line. This isn't a comeback. This is a continuation of living, of loving, of telling the truth. And when the credits rolled, the first person I saw waiting backstage was Lily, smiling through tears. You did it, she whispered. No, I said, pulling her close. We did. That night, back on the same rooftop where we first truly saw each other, the city stretched endlessly below us. She leaned against me, quiet, thoughtful. Do you ever miss who you used to be? Sometimes, I admitted. But then I remember she was so busy surviving, she forgot how to live. Lily turned to me, eyes glistening under the stars. And now, Now, I said, brushing a strand of hair from her face, I'm alive. Because of you. Her lips curved into a smile. You were always alive, Madison. You just needed someone to remind you. And when she kissed me slow, certain, like the world had finally stopped spinning, I realized that love wasn't about being saved. It was about being seen. A year passed. A year since the scandal. A year since the world stopped being the cage I thought it was and became something like home again. My show had found its footing, not through spectacle or gossip, but through truth. Each episode told stories of women rebuilding after chaos, mothers, artists, activists, dreamers. It wasn't glamorous. It was real. And somewhere along the way, people stopped calling me disgraced. They just started calling me Madison again. But I'd learned that reputation wasn't something you owned. It was something people loaned you. What really mattered was what you built when no one was watching. And for me, that was Lily. We had moved to a small brownstone in Brooklyn, creaky floors, overgrown ivy, and a studio for her that always smelled faintly of paint and jasmine. Our mornings were lazy, sacred things. She'd hum as she brewed coffee. I'd scribble notes for my next show at the kitchen table. Sometimes she'd paint me without warning little sketches of quiet moments. My messy hair, my half smile, the sunlight touching my shoulder. You're obsessed, I teased once. Guilty, she said without looking up. It's how I keep you close even when you're far. Far? I asked, sipping coffee. She glanced up, that wry glint in her eyes. You're always chasing storms, Maddie. I just paint the calm. I smiled. Guess that makes us a good team. Should have been perfect. But perfection doesn't exist, not even in love that feels written in the stars. One evening, after my show wrapped a particularly emotional episode about queer youth homelessness, I came home late. The apartment was dark except for the soft glow of her studio lamp. She was painting again, but not her usual landscapes. It was us. Two women standing on opposite sides of a bridge, reaching but not touching. Between them, the city burned in watercolor fire. I stood behind her quietly. It's beautiful, I said. Her brush stilled. It's not finished. What's it about? Her voice was calm, too calm. Distance. Between who? She turned, eyes shimmering in the lamplight. Between what we say and what we feel. I froze. Lily, you've been different lately, she whispered. Present but not here. You talk about truth every night on TV, but you barely speak to me when you're home. Her words hit hard because they were true. I'd buried myself in work again, terrified of losing what I'd built, the second chance, the respect, the fragile peace. And in doing so, I'd begun losing her. I reached for her hand. I didn't mean to drift away. She shook her head, tears threatening. You always mean well, Maddie. But love doesn't live in intentions. It lives in attention. Silence filled the room, heavy, aching, familiar. I'm scared, I admitted softly. Of messing everything up again. Of losing you. Then stop trying to manage love like it's another job, she said, her voice trembling. Just let it be what it is. And then she did something that broke me. She smiled, faint and tired. I think we both need space to remember who we are outside of each other. The words tasted like goodbye. She left for Vermont the next morning, an artist residency she'd applied to months ago. 2 months, she said at the door, suitcase in hand. Maybe we'll find each other again when the noise quiets. I tried to smile, but it cracked. And if we don't? Her eyes softened. Then at least we'll know the love was real. The door closed, and suddenly the apartment, our home, became too big for one heartbeat. Days turned into weeks. I threw myself into work again, not to forget her, but to survive the missing. Everywhere I looked, she lingered. A forgotten paintbrush. The half-read poetry book by the bed. The faint scent of her shampoo on my pillow. On air, I told stories about resilience. Off air, I learned what it meant. One night, after wrapping a segment about healing, I stayed behind in the studio. The cameras were off, but I found myself speaking to the empty set. People talk about closure like it's something you can find, I said quietly. But maybe closure isn't an ending. Maybe it's the moment you stop fighting the fact that some chapters stay open forever. My producer, a kind older woman named Diane, found me afterward. You should keep that for your final monologue this season, she said gently. I smiled. Maybe I will. 2 months passed. No word from Lily. Until one afternoon, a small package arrived at the studio. Inside was a watercolor the bridge painting, now finished. But this time, the two women were no longer separated by fire. They stood side by side watching the sunrise together. At the bottom in her looping handwriting were 3 words. Come find me. I didn't think. I just packed a bag and drove north. Vermont in autumn looked like something out of a dream. Golden leaves, crisp air, mountains painted in firelight. I found her at the residency cabin by the lake, sitting on the porch with a blanket over her shoulders, sketching the horizon. When she looked up and saw me, her lips parted, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then she laughed, a sound I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. You really came, she said, standing. I told you once, I said, breathless. You saved me when everything fell apart. I'm not letting us fall apart too. She stepped closer. And what if I needed saving from myself this time? Then we save each other. Her eyes shimmered with tears. God, I missed you. Good, I whispered, smiling through my own. Because missing you ruined me. And then she kissed me, desperate, shaking home. The world went silent except for the heartbeat between us. We spent the weekend wrapped in quiet. No cameras, no headlines, no deadlines. Just 2 women rediscovering the rhythm of breath and laughter. She showed me her latest works, all inspired by truth. One painting stopped me cold. 2 hands, fingers intertwined, painted in bold strokes of gold and blue. It's us, she said softly. Gold for healing. Blue for faith. It's beautiful, I murmured. You're beautiful. Her laughter was soft against my skin. You always know how to make words sound like promises. Because they are, I said. When we returned to New York, everything felt lighter, not because the world had changed, but because we had. I'd learned that love wasn't about escaping chaos. It was about holding hands through it. And for the first time, I wanted the world to see that love. So, on the final episode of my show's season, I ended with something different. No script. No rehearsed lines. Just truth. I once thought my career defined me. I began looking straight into the camera. Then it collapsed. I thought I'd lost everything until I realized that sometimes, falling apart is just the soul's way of making room for something better. I paused, smiling. I found love in the wreckage. Not the kind that fixes you, but the kind that stands beside you while you fix yourself. And if there's anything I've learned this year, it's that love, real, honest love, is the greatest story we'll ever tell. The audience was silent. Then applause broke out, raw and thunderous. When the camera stopped rolling, I turned to the wings. She was there waiting. Always waiting. That night, we walked home hand in hand through the city that had once devoured me. Now it felt forgiving. At a red light, she looked up at me. You ever think about how different our lives could have been if you hadn't walked into that cafe that day? I smiled. Every day. And every time I do, I thank every storm that led me to you. Her eyes softened. Even the one that destroyed everything? Especially that one, I said. Because it made room for something real. We crossed the street together, the city lights painting our shadows gold. Months later, we opened an art and media collective together, the Lighthouse Project. A space for queer creators, journalists, and artists to tell their stories fearlessly. Our first exhibit? Lily's Women Who Rise. A collection of portraits of women, real, flawed, radiant, who rebuilt after loss. One of them was me. Beneath the painting, a small plaque read, "To Madison, for teaching me that truth isn't loud, it's brave." I stood there that night, surrounded by light and laughter, watching her talk to guests, her hands flying as she spoke. And I realized, I wasn't just proud of her. I was proud of us. Of surviving. Of choosing love again and again in a world that tried to define us by its fear. Later, as the crowd thinned and the city hummed outside, she found me by the window. "Hey," she said, slipping her hand into mine. "You okay?" I looked at her, really looked, and felt the weight of every version of myself that had led to this moment. "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm finally where I belong." She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "Home. Home," I echoed. The lights outside flickered across her face, soft, golden, endless. And as the night unfolded around us, I realized something simple, something true. Love doesn't rescue you from the world. It gives you the courage to live in it. And as long as I had her, her laughter, her quiet strength, her endless heart, I knew I would never be lost again. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.